Ethan Cross never thought he'd end up sharing an apartment with an alien. Yet there he was, living in a tiny unit on Luna Station with a Xilari woman named Kira. When he signed up for the interspecies co-living program, he thought it would be easy. Cultural exchange, they said. An opportunity of a lifetime. Ethan quickly learned that opportunity meant dealing with endless awkward moments. Kira was unique. She had lavender skin that shimmered faintly in the light, silver markings along her arms, and glowing golden eyes that seemed to stare into Ethan's soul. Her people didn't wear much clothing, only long flowing robes. She never really spoke loudly either. Her voice was calm, melodic, and it somehow echoed in his head. The first week had been rough. Kira didn't understand human privacy. She walked in and out of rooms without knocking, asked endless questions about humans, and looked confused whenever Ethan complained. "Why do humans hide themselves?" she'd ask, tilting her head. "It's so inefficient." Ethan had to repeat one rule over and over. "Doors are there for a reason, Kira. Knock before you enter." She usually ignored him. One morning, it all spiraled out of control. Ethan had just finished showering. He stepped out of the bathroom with a towel wrapped around his waist, steam following him into the hallway. He hummed a tune, his mind far from reality. Then it happened. Kira appeared at the end of the hallway, her glowing eyes locking onto him. Ethan froze like a deer in headlights. For a moment, neither of them moved. Ethan managed to croak, tightening his grip on the towel. "Kira, can you?" But Kira simply tilted her head, her expression neutral, almost curious. "Is this what humans look like under their coverings?" Ethan's face turned red. "Kira, seriously, turn around." She didn't. Instead, she took a step closer, her eyes narrowing slightly, like she was inspecting him for science. "Your form is different than I imagined." "Fascinating." "This is not fascinating," Ethan barked, darting back into the bathroom and slamming the door. "Privacy. Ever heard of it? Humans are so dramatic." Kira replied from the hallway, her voice calm as ever. Inside the bathroom, Ethan leaned against the door, his face burning with embarrassment. "Great. Just great. My alien roommate thinks I'm a science exhibit." When he finally emerged, fully dressed this time, Kira was sitting at the small kitchen table, sipping tea as if nothing had happened. Ethan cleared his throat. "We need to talk about boundaries." She looked up. "Boundaries?" "Yes, like knocking before entering a room, or not staring at someone hose." He paused, waving his hands awkwardly. "Not fully dressed." Kira blinked, unbothered. "But why hide?" "Xilari do not have such customs." "Well, humans do," Ethan shot back. "So let's keep things human-friendly." "Okay." Kira shrugged, her glowing eyes twinkling with amusement. "If you say so, Ethan Cross." Ethan sighed, already dreading what was coming next. This was going to be a long co-living experience. Ethan thought things would go back to normal after his incident with Kira. He was wrong. For the next 2 days, Kira kept sneaking curious glances at him. She wasn't subtle about it either. Whether they were in the kitchen or sitting awkwardly on the couch, she would tilt her head and stare with those glowing golden eyes. "What?" Ethan finally snapped, holding his fork mid-bite during dinner. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Kira didn't hesitate. "You humans are strange. Why are you so embarrassed about your natural form?" Ethan nearly choked on his food. "Can we not talk about this over dinner?" Kira blinked calmly, sipping her tea. "It is only a question. You seem unnecessarily dramatic." "Dramatic?" Ethan sputtered. "You walked in on me naked, Kira. That's a big deal for humans." Kira frowned slightly, as if she was trying to understand. "But Xilari do not hide ourselves. It is illogical." "Well, we humans do," Ethan said firmly, pointing his fork at her. "It's called modesty, privacy, and it's not up for debate." Kira fell silent for a moment, then shrugged. "Humans are complicated creatures." Ethan groaned and leaned back in his chair. Living with an alien was starting to drive him nuts, But as frustrating as Kara could be, there was something about her curiosity that made it hard to stay mad. She wasn't trying to be annoying. She just didn't understand. Later that evening, Ethan sat at his desk, working on a repair schedule for the station's ventilation systems. His job as a maintenance engineer kept him busy, and for once, he was thankful for the distraction. Kara, meanwhile, sat cross-legged on the floor nearby, quietly sketching in a strange-looking notebook. The glowing lines of her drawings seemed alive, like tiny veins of light. Ethan tried not to watch, but it was hard to ignore how peaceful she looked. Finally, he broke the silence. "What are you drawing, anyway?" Kyra looked up, her lips curving into a faint smile. "You." Ethan blinked. "Me? Why?" "You are fascinating," Kyra said simply. "Humans are so different. You live with so many rules and emotions. I wish to understand." "Well, stop trying to understand me," Ethan muttered. "And don't sketch me without asking first." Kyra tilted her head. "Would you prefer I sketch you with clothing?" Ethan's face turned red instantly. "Oh, for the love of Kyra." Kyra laughed softly, the sound like chimes. "You humans are amusing. Your faces change color when you are flustered." Ethan put his face in his hands and groaned. "I'm going to lose my mind." Kyra stood, placing her glowing notebook aside. "Do not worry, Ethan Cross. I will solve this mystery of human modesty." Ethan stared at her, horrified. "That's what I'm afraid of." And for the first time, he realized living with Kyra might get far more complicated than he ever imagined. Ethan woke up the next morning hoping for a quiet day. No awkward conversations, no alien curiosity, just peace. Unfortunately, living with Kyra meant his life was anything but peaceful. It started with a loud crash. Ethan shot up in bed, his heart pounding. What the? He bolted out of his room and stopped dead in his tracks. The living room was a disaster zone. Kyra stood in the middle of the chaos, holding a broken metal rod, formerly part of the couch, while looking at it with confusion. The cushions were scattered, and the coffee table had a crack running through it. "What happened?" Ethan shouted, staring at the mess. Kyra turned to him calmly, holding up the broken rod like it was evidence. "Your furniture is weak." Ethan blinked, running a hand down his face. "Weak? Kyra, what were you doing?" She tilted her head. "I was testing its strength. Humans rely on many objects. I wish to understand why." Ethan groaned. "Kyra, you don't need to test my furniture. It's a couch, not a science experiment." Kyra looked genuinely puzzled. "But how do you trust something if you do not know its limits?" Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. He had no answer to that. "Because we just do. Now stop breaking things." "I will compensate you," Kyra said with a faint smile. "Silari currency is very valuable." "Yeah, tell that to the landlord," Ethan muttered. He knelt to pick up the broken pieces, but Kyra stepped forward. "Let me," she said, her glowing hands hovering above the damage. Ethan watched, stunned, as the air shimmered around her palms. Slowly, the broken rod began to reform, the cracks sealing like they'd never been there. Ethan blinked. "Wait, you can fix things." "Yes," Kyra said matter-of-factly. "It is a basic skill among my people." Ethan stared at her for a moment, then sighed. "Next time, maybe fix it before you destroy it." Kyra nodded, though her faint smile suggested she still didn't see the problem. "Understood." Ethan flopped onto the couch and rubbed his temples. "You aliens are gonna give me gray hair, I swear." Kyra sat beside him, completely unbothered. "Gray hair? Is that a human illness?" Ethan gave her a look. "It's what happens when humans are stressed out of their minds." Kyra studied him for a moment, her golden eyes glowing softly. "I do not wish to stress you, Ethan. Perhaps you are teaching me as much as I am teaching you." Ethan snorted. "You're teaching me patience. Lots of it." She smiled faintly. "And you are teaching me boundaries." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Really? Because it doesn't feel like it. Kyra tilted her head. I am trying. It is a slow process. Ethan shook his head, fighting a laugh. Yeah, well, let's not test my limits next, all right? Kyra nodded. Agreed. But deep down, Ethan knew this truce wouldn't last. With Kyra around, something always spiraled out of control. Ethan was starting to think his life had officially gone off the rails. It wasn't just the furniture incident. It was everything. Kyra was everywhere. One evening, Ethan decided to take a moment to himself. He sat on the couch with his tablet, determined to binge-watch something mindless and pretend for a while that he didn't share his apartment with a glowing, curious alien. He'd just put his feet up when Kyra appeared, again, right in front of him. Ethan, what are you doing? She asked, peering down at the screen like a cat inspecting prey. Ethan sighed loudly. I'm trying to relax, Kyra. Do you mind? Relax, Kyra repeated, tilting her head. You stare at the screen. How is that relaxing? Ethan waved his hand in the air. It's entertainment. Humans do this to escape stress. Ever heard of personal space? Kyra ignored the comment and plopped down beside him. Too close for comfort. I wish to understand. What are you watching? Ethan groaned and ran a hand through his hair. Kyra, you don't have to understand everything. Sometimes humans just do things because we like them. Kyra blinked, completely unbothered. Show me. Ethan exhaled sharply. Fine. If it'll get you off my back. He tapped play. It was a human action series. Explosions, fast chases, and overly dramatic heroes. To Ethan's surprise, Kyra's golden eyes widened in awe. This is incredible, she said, her voice excited for the first time. You like it? Ethan asked, raising an eyebrow. Kyra nodded eagerly. Yes, these humans, such bravery, such chaos. She paused, her glowing markings shimmering faintly. Although it is unrealistic. Ethan chuckled. Yeah, welcome to human entertainment. Logic isn't always invited. Kyra leaned forward as an explosion rocked the screen. Is this how humans fight? Ethan laughed. No. It's way less glamorous and way more terrifying. Kyra turned to him, suddenly serious. You speak as though you know. Ethan froze. He hadn't expected that. He cleared his throat and looked away. I did a little time in service when I was younger. That's all. Kyra studied him quietly, her golden eyes softening. I see. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. It wasn't a topic he liked to talk about. Anyway, it's just a dumb show. Okay. Don't overthink it. Kyra sat back, still watching him. You are very complicated. Ethan cross. You hide so much. Yeah, well, Ethan muttered. Humans are good at that. For once, Kyra didn't argue. She simply turned back to the screen, her face thoughtful. They sat together in silence as the show played, the explosions and yelling filling the room. It wasn't normal. It wasn't quiet. But for some reason, Ethan didn't mind. As the credits rolled, Kyra spoke softly. Thank you for sharing, Ethan. Ethan glanced at her, a small smile tugging at his lips. You're welcome, I guess. He still didn't understand Kyra, but maybe, just maybe, he was starting to get used to her. The next morning, Ethan woke up to the smell of something unusual. It wasn't the comforting aroma of coffee or toast. No, this was something sharp and almost chemical, like someone had set an alien science lab on fire. Alarmed, he jumped out of bed and ran straight to the kitchen. What he saw nearly gave him a heart attack. Kyra stood proudly at the stove, a swirling purple liquid bubbling dangerously in a pot. Smoke hissed from the pan as she stirred with a spatula. His metal spatula, which was now half melted. What are you doing? Ethan shouted, his voice cracking. Kyra turned, beaming with pride. I am cooking, Ethan Cross. For you. Ethan blinked. Cooking? That's not cooking. That's science gone wrong. Kyra frowned, confused. But this is a Scifi recipe, a bonding dish. It is tradition. Ethan pinched the bridge of his nose. Kyra, humans don't eat, whatever that is. It is safe, she replied with a nod. Mostly. Mostly, Ethan shouted. You're going to blow up my kitchen. Move. He grabbed the pot, hissing when the handle burned his hand, and poured the bubbling sludge into the sink. It made a sound like it was alive as it hit the metal, hissing and steaming before swirling down the drain. Kyra gasped. Ethan, that was a sacred dish. It was a hazard. Ethan shot back, turning to face her. Do you have any idea what could have happened? That stuff could have poisoned me or started a fire. Kyra folded her arms, her silver markings glowing faintly in irritation. You exaggerate. Scifi cooking is an art. Your human stomachs are simply unprepared. Ethan threw up his hands. Because we don't eat glowing purple goo. You should have asked me first. Kyra's golden eyes narrowed. I was trying to honor you. Ethan cross. Humans say that sharing meals brings people closer. I thought it would. Please you. Ethan paused. Her words caught him off guard. He let out a breath, his anger softening. Wait, you did this for me. Kyra's expression wavered for the first time. Yes, you have been kind to me, despite my mistakes. This is how my people show respect. Ethan stared at her for a moment. Beneath her alien logic and lack of boundaries, Kyra really was trying to understand him. And maybe even connect with him. He scratched the back of his neck, suddenly feeling guilty. Look, I appreciate the effort, Ethan muttered, his tone softer now. But next time, just ask. I'll teach you how to make something humans can actually eat. Kyra tilted her head, a faint smile pulling at her lips. You will teach me. Yeah, Ethan said, grabbing a pan. But no glowing goo, got it? Kyra nodded solemnly. Understood. As Ethan started cooking real breakfast, Kyra stood beside him, watching every movement like a curious student. For once it felt normal. Ethan glanced at her and smirked. Just don't burn down the kitchen again. I make no promises, Kyra replied with a playful glint in her eyes. Ethan sighed, shaking his head. Life with Kyra was chaos, but somehow he didn't mind as much anymore. Ethan had finally started to accept the chaos of living with Kyra. Sure, she asked too many questions, broke things she didn't understand, and nearly poisoned him with glowing goo, but at least they were making progress. Or so he thought. That evening, Ethan returned from work with grease on his hands and exhaustion weighing on his shoulders. All he wanted was a quiet evening and a long shower. Kyra, he called as he entered the apartment. Please don't let there be any more experiments today. Silence. That wasn't a good sign. Kyra. He tried again, walking into the living room. She wasn't there, but something else was, a strange hum filling the air. It buzzed softly, almost vibrating in his chest. Ethan frowned and followed the sound to the balcony. He stopped dead. Kyra was standing there, her arms stretched outward, her silver markings glowing like starlight. Small orbs of light swirled around her, pulsing to the rhythm of her hum. It was beautiful, but also concerning. What are you doing? Ethan asked, stepping closer. Kyra opened her eyes and turned, her markings fading back to normal. Ah, Ethan, you are back. Yeah, I'm back, Ethan said cautiously. Now tell me, what was that? Kyra smiled faintly. I was strengthening our bond. Ethan blinked. Our what now? The bond. Kyra repeated like it was obvious. When I saw you unclothed, an accidental energy connection was formed between us. I have been nurturing it. Ethan groaned and rubbed his temples. I thought we agreed to forget about that incident. I did not agree, Kyra replied, tilting her head. The bond is important. It connects us. I can sense your emotions now. When you are angry, I feel it. When you are amused, I feel that too. Ethan froze, staring at her. Wait, you can feel my emotions. Yes, Kyra said calmly. Like right now. You are irritated, confused, and tired. Ethan took a step back, horrified. You're telling me you've been inside my head this whole time. Kyra. It is not inside your head. Kyra corrected, her tone amused. It is simply a link between us. My people use bonds to grow closer. It is an honor. An honor. Ethan shouted. I don't want anyone knowing how I feel, let alone an alien roommate. Kyra frowned slightly. Why hide what you feel? Hiding emotions weakens the bond. Because humans like their privacy, Ethan snapped. Kyra's gaze softened as she stepped closer. Ethan Cross, I do not mean to upset you. This bond was unexpected for both of us, but perhaps it is not a bad thing. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. Yeah, well, I'm still processing the fact that I'm accidentally bonded to an alien. Kyra smiled gently. Then we will process it together. Ethan looked at her glowing markings and shook his head. This was far beyond anything he'd signed up for. Just, no more glowing magic on the balcony, okay. The neighbors will complain. Kyra tilted her head and grinned faintly. As you wish, Ethan Cross. The next day, Ethan realized things with Kyra were spiraling faster than he could keep up. It started when he walked into the living room to find her levitating. What are you doing now? He asked, his voice full of dread. Kyra floated cross-legged a few feet above the ground, glowing softly. Meditating. Strengthening the bond. Ethan threw his hands in the air, again with the bond. You're treating this like it's a friendship bracelet. I told you, I'm not comfortable with this. Kyra's eyes opened, golden and calm. You cannot avoid it, Ethan Cross. The bond exists whether you accept it or not. Our energies are connected. That's great, Ethan muttered sarcastically, collapsing onto the couch. Maybe you can explain that to my boss when I accidentally snap at him because I'm suddenly sharing your emotions. Kyra tilted her head. You felt my emotions at work. Yes, Ethan groaned. 1 minute I'm fine, and the next I feel calm. Like I'm walking through a meadow or something. It was you, wasn't it? Kyra smiled faintly. It seems the bond is growing stronger. That's not a good thing. Ethan snapped. We're going to turn into some weird hive mind at this rate. Kyra floated down gently, landing on her feet. You exaggerate, as always. The bond does not erase your identity. It strengthens it. Ethan rolled his eyes. Strengthens it? You mean ruins my peace and sanity. Kyra walked toward him, her expression unusually serious. Ethan, there is something you must understand. My people form bonds when we trust deeply. This was accidental, but it is still significant. You should not fear it. Ethan stared at her for a moment, trying to understand the weight behind her words. What happens if I do fear it? What if I don't want this bond? Kyra looked away, her glowing markings dimming slightly. Breaking it would harm us both. Severing the connection could leave lasting damage. Ethan's stomach sank. Wait, what kind of damage? Your energy and mine are linked. Kyra explained softly. If it is forcefully severed, the backlash could harm our minds. Or worse. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, his frustration fading into a cold realization. So, we're stuck like this. For now, yes, Kyra admitted. But it is not a curse, Ethan. If we work together, the bond can be a gift. Ethan sat back, rubbing his temples. A week ago, his biggest problem was running out of coffee. Now he was soul-linked to an alien who levitated in his living room. This bond better come with a refund, he muttered. Kyra smiled faintly. It comes with understanding, trust, and strength. Perhaps that is better than a refund. Ethan couldn't help but chuckle, despite himself. You're impossible, you know that. I prefer determined, Kyra replied, her golden eyes twinkling. Ethan sighed, staring at the ceiling. This is my life now, huh? Yes, Kyra said softly. And it is only beginning.